Welcome to the Flaming Ice Cube Knits. Today we're going to be going over the long tail cast on. This is probably the most popular cast on. It's very versatile. It gives you a firm yet flexible edge. So to do a slip knot, we're going to begin with our yarn, take our tail and cross it over the working yarn so that we have what looks like an awareness ribbon. Then we'll take that tail and push it through the loop from back to front, grabbing onto it, and then gently pulling. This will be our first stitch on the needle. And then we want to snug that stitch up. So we'll just slide that slip knot. And we want the stitch to be firm, but not too tight. So what that means is when we hold our needle up, it should stay in place, but it should also be able to easily slide along the needle. So let's get started with the cast on. We want to hold our needle in our right hand with our needle tip pointing to the left, and then we'll insert our left index finger and thumb between the two strands of yarn. And we want to make sure that the tail is resting on our thumb. We'll hold on to our original stitch with our right index finger. Once we have our thumb and index finger between the two strands, we'll close our other fingers around both strands of yarn, creating what looks like a teepee of yarn. We'll then drop that TP, turning it into a V between our thumb and index finger. We then want to take our needle tip all the way to the left. On our way back to center, we're going to scoop up the piece of yarn on the outside of our thumb. We'll then take that needle over the piece of yarn on our index finger, and on our way back to center, scoop up that piece. We then put the needle tip on our thumb, slide that down our thumb towards our body, and then we'll drop our thumb, releasing the yarn, and then gently pull on both strands. So again, we have our TP, our V, our needle tip goes all the way to the left, picks up that strand on the way back to center, then we go over the piece on our index finger, on our way back to center, pick that one up, down our thumb, and then drop the thumb, releasing the yarn. So now I'm going to explain the same thing a different way. We're going to begin the same way. We put our thumb and index finger between the two strands, grab on, we have our TP, drop the yarn, and now we have our V. But now let's think of the tip of the needle right here as a bunny. So this bunny is hungry. He's going to be down underground. And you can see around the thumb we have a loop of yarn. That's our bunny hole. So our bunny's underground. He's going to jump up out of his hole. Now he's going to go grab a piece of lettuce, represented by this piece of yarn on our index finger. And now he's going to go back down into his hole and run away. And then we drop our thumb. So thinking of it as the bunny, we're doing the exact same thing. It's just a different way of thinking about it. So our rabbit is underground, he jumps up out of his hole, he goes over, he grabs that piece of yarn, which is lettuce to him, and then he goes back down into his hole and runs away. So you may notice as you're doing this that that long tail that we created in the beginning is being used up. That is the nature of this cast on. So one of the questions that we need to resolve is, where do we put that slip knot? Because it varies. You'll need more tail if you're casting on 50 stitches than you would if you were casting on 5. So a rough estimate as to where to put that slip knot, if we put the very end of the yarn on our needle and then we wrap the yarn around our needle 10 times. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And we want to wrap that yarn about the same tension at which we knit. Not too tight, not too loose. We're then going to mark where that is, take it off, and that is approximately how much yarn we will need to cast on 10 stitches. So if we're casting on, say, 20 stitches, we know that we need to double that. That's how much yarn we would need to cast on 20 stitches. After we finish our cast on, we want to have a 6-inch tail left over, so we're going to add 6 inches. So that is where we want to put our slip knot. We don't want our cast on to be too tight. And a lot of times when we begin knitting, we're very nervous and we'll really tighten that up. So you may have heard people say that they recommend using a needle one size larger than what you're supposed to. Well, what that does is it actually gives you a larger stitch, so you'll have excess yarn here. But where we really want the yarn is down here in between the stitches. So a simpler and more effective way to do that, simpler because you don't have to have two sizes of needles, is if you use your finger as a little stop gauge. So when you cast on the stitch, slide it up to your finger, and notice how the stitches aren't pushed right up against each other. There's a little gap there. And then I'm going to move my finger, hold that stitch in place, and do the next one. That is going to give us extra yarn in between the stitches, which is exactly where we want it. So again, what we're doing is we're using that gauge, and what we're not doing is shoving that stitch right up next to the other one, like that. We're leaving a little bit of space in between our stitches so that our cast on will be nice and even and flexible.